Hello, I'm Shank, and I made GameCube Joy-Cons. It all started on October 20th, 2016, when Nintendo announced their new Nintendo Switch console. After seeing the console's controller modularity, alternative controllers like the GameCube were the first thing that came to mind. Nintendo is no stranger to fragmenting their controller schemes. It was just too obvious, and mock-ups and renders began appearing all over the internet. I knew I could do it, but I opted not to. Surely Nintendo or another modder would do it first. However, after 2 years, the release of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and the reissue of official GameCube controllers, I knew I had to. The theory behind this project is simple. Take a set of real Joy-Cons, tear them down to bare components, put them in a GameCube controller, and wire buttons and sticks to the Joy-Cons board. In reality, getting it all to work wasn't so easy. It required several months of planning and hard work. It also required a significant redesign of the GameCube controller's internals with custom 3D printed components. For this video, I'm going to go through the whole process of how I made them and the challenges I faced. But if you don't care and just want to see the complete GameCube Joy-Cons in action, you can skip ahead to the end of the video. Time to get planning. As an avid Super Smash Bros. Player and GameCube controller snob, authentic GameCube controller feel is extremely important to me. This is why I opted to use a real, first-party Wavebird shell as a base. The Wavebird is Nintendo's official wireless GameCube controller. It feels exactly like a GameCube controller, but it has a larger central body to accommodate the batteries. Fortunately, the center body is exactly the same height as the Switch. The thicker body also gives me somewhere to put the main board, batteries, rumble motors, and other parts the Joy-Cons need. Lucky for me, a good friend and talented modder named MADMORDA had several leftover Wavebird shells from some of her projects. She was kind enough to provide them to me for free, so I didn't even need to sacrifice any working Wavebirds for this project. The first step to cutting a Wavebird in half is, well, cutting it in half. I used tape to line up a straight line around the entire controller. After shading with a pencil and removing the tape, I'm left with a clearly visible line where the graphite ends. However, to get the cleanest cut, I don't actually want to cut on this line. First, I cut outside the line with a Dremel, then slowly worked my way towards it. Finally, I close in on the line by sanding it on a flat surface. This gives a very clean, straight cut. After cutting it in half and gutting the battery compartment, I'm left with a massive hole on two faces of the controller. I scan the controller and trace the faces in CAD to match the organic geometry of the controller. I also needed a way to properly mount the rails. Securely mounting the rails is extremely important, as the entire weight of the Switch rests on these rails. The structure needed to have room for the internals of the Joy-Con, and also not inhibit the ability to disassemble the controller. My brother came up with the idea of using horizontal beams for additional support around these screw posts. After many weeks and several iterative test prints, I finally tuned the design to my satisfaction. It snaps right into the void left behind, and has screw mounts for both the Joy-Con board and its rails, close enough to where I didn't need to redesign the ribbon cables. Many keen observers will know that the Joy-Cons have a few more buttons than the GameCube controllers do. The lack of a second Z button just wasn't going to cut it for me. I needed it hand-carved, but I'm not satisfied with my own hand-carving abilities. I wanted it done right. So I reached out to Bassline, an incredible GameCube controller modder with a huge portfolio of amazing controller mods. This ape with a knife is fantastic at carving GameCube controllers. So I boxed up the left amputee and shipped it off to him to carve my second Z button, and the results were fantastic. If you're looking to have GameCube controller mod work done, I can't recommend him enough. Speaking of extra buttons, compared to the GameCube's Lonely Start button, the Joy-Cons have a plus, minus, home, and screenshot button to account for. Compatibility is key, so adding all of these buttons was a must. To maintain the aesthetic of the original controller, I opted to add 2 GameCube Start buttons to each side. After careful measurement, I designed a 3D printed mount for the 2 buttons on each side. After gluing the front half in place and drilling proper holes, the other half can be screwed into place, creating a sturdy assembly that can easily be disassembled for repair. GameCube sticks don't have the clicky buttons underneath the sticks that all modern controllers do. And unfortunately, modern sticks are taller and cannot be used as drop-in replacements on the original PCB. Fitting clicky sticks required a significant redesign and a 3D printed piece to hold the stick down at a further distance. I opted to use Wii U stick boxes, which are the same as Switch Pro stick boxes. After adding GameCube stick caps, which fit perfectly onto them with no further modification, they feel exactly like GameCube controller sticks. Mounting the sticks deeper also required a redesign of the mounting mechanism for the left shoulder button. I had to design and 3D print a new mounting piece for the shoulder actuators, as well as cut down the old piece holding it in place. The entire assembly is sturdy, can be completely disassembled, and most importantly, it still feels, looks, and behaves exactly like an original GameCube controller shoulder button. After all this, the new, longer stick was able to fit right in. Integrating the clicky sticks was a giant design hurdle, but it was worth it to keep compatibility. Speaking of GameCube shoulder buttons, this is the first point where I had to make a decision for compatibility reasons. The shoulder buttons on the GameCube controllers are both analog and digital. They have an analog slider on the inside to detect how far you press it, with a clicky button at the end for a digital press. On the other hand, the shoulder buttons on the Switch are digital only, with no support for analog input. The shoulder buttons on the Switch are either pressed or not pressed, with no in-between. This left me with two choices. The first option was to keep full trigger distance, but nothing would happen until the trigger was fully pulled. The other option is to plug the shoulder buttons to shorten the trigger pull distance. I gave both options a try, but decided to plug the shoulder buttons with these 3D printed plugs I found online. The dead space of the unplugged shoulder buttons just didn't feel right. Now that most of the structure was done, it was time to pretty it up. Gray is nice, but what I really wanted was that iconic GameCube indigo. My aesthetic for my projects is normally pretty vanilla, so my painting skills are lacking. MADMORDA, on the other hand, is an incredible modder who specializes in making everything look amazing. She has rightfully earned the title Painting Queen in our community for her case mods, many of which she showcases on her YouTube channel. She made the world's smallest functioning GameCube controller, then made the world's smallest functioning GameCube, just so it wouldn't be so lonely. Lucky for me, MADMORDA only lives a few hours away. So I purchased her recommended supplies, packed up my tools, and drove down to her donkey farm in the middle of nowhere to hang out for a weekend and get some painting lessons from the best. The most important part of painting is the prep, and my project needed some work. In order to smooth out the 3D printed components and blend them into the body, MADMORDA recommended a process using Bondo spot putty. I applied the putty, let it dry, then sanded it off. After that, applying a layer of primer lets me see what else needs work. Then, I applied more putty, let it dry, sanded it off, sprayed more primer, added more putty, let it dry, sanded it off, and so on and so on. This was by far the most tedious part, but it was worth it to get the desired smooth finish. Now that the bodywork is done, it's time to paint. With MADMORDA's guidance and recommended brand of paint, I applied an even coat. With all the time I put into bodywork, I was pretty nervous for this part. MADMORDA continued to correct my technique, offer tips, point out places I missed, and give advice the entire time. There were so many times I would have screwed up had she not caught me. The paint came out great, and I really have her to thank for it. She went above and beyond helping me this project, and even resin cast me some color-matched shoulder buttons. MADMORDA is an extremely talented modder, and if you like these kinds of mods, I highly recommend checking out her channel. I also want to give a shout out to her eBay store, where she sells a huge variety of custom resin-cast Joy-Con replacement buttons. She's really creative with all her buttons, but my personal favorite are her GameCube-themed ones. They only take a few minutes to install and serve as a great first project to dip your toes into modding. I'll leave a link to her eBay store in the description below. Unfortunately, at this point, it was time to pack up and head home. The bodywork took so long that I wasn't able to start painting until the last day. This meant I was on my own to apply clear coat, without her supervision. Thankfully, I was able to use what I learned from my trip to apply a decent clear coat without screwing it up. Finally, it's time for my bread and butter, the electronics. I've rewired plenty of controllers for portables, like the portable Wiis in my other videos. So, in theory, it should be the same. In reality, well, Joy-Cons are whack. On normal controllers, connecting the button's data line to ground presses the button. Joy-Cons have multiple grounds and different buttons must be connected to the right ground to work. Some buttons even need to be pulled high instead of connected to ground to work. I was able to find documentation online by Deku Nukem that had many of the soldering points. His work saved me quite a bit of time, but his documentation was mostly software side, so it didn't have everything I needed. It took several days of soldering and troubleshooting under a microscope, but I was finally able to figure out how it all worked. It required some fairly difficult soldering points, including tiny resistor pads and fine-pitch ribbon cable connector pins. Unfortunately, this project is not one I would recommend for beginners. I don't remember how many times I had to close, test, reopen, and troubleshoot this project. The GameCube Joy-Cons are now closed and fully functional, but the project isn't done yet. These Joy-Cons have everything real Joy-Cons do, including wireless functionality. To take this project above and beyond, I wanted to make my own centerpiece for the best experience when using them wirelessly. I took some measurements of the Joy-Con rails and the GameCube Joy-Cons themselves to mock up and 3D print a centerpiece. Once again, I repeated the process of sanding, priming, painting, and clear coating to match the look of the GameCube Joy-Cons. They snap right in and match the geometry of the original controller. When inserted, they are the exact same width as an original GameCube controller, and they look just like a Wavebird. Kind of funny how this project has gone full circle. Finally, after months of work, the GameCube Joy-Cons are done. They use real GameCube controller parts, so they feel exactly like a GameCube controller. With real Joy-Con hardware inside, they have complete functionality and compatibility. They have every extra button needed, including the stupid left and stupid right shoulder buttons that nobody likes. I included all the bells and whistles standard for first-party Joy-Cons, including HD rumble, gyro, and amiibo support. My GameCube Joy-Cons can charge through the rail, work wirelessly, and feel just like a Wavebird with a custom center grip. Playing Super Smash Bros. Ultimate on these is a huge step up from regular Joy-Cons. Although I've been mostly using these to play Smash Bros., they work with any Switch game. I can explore the world in Breath of the Wild, possess inanimate objects in Super Mario Odyssey, replay classic Super Nintendo and original Nintendo games, and attempt to play Super Smash Bros. Online. They use the same full-size stick assemblies as the Wii U and Switch Pro controllers. The only time these sticks drift is when I'm playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This project was so much work, but I'm really happy with how it came out. I'll have a link to the thread with the CAD files I used to make this, but do keep in mind this project is really difficult, and not a good first electronics or modding project at all. All the projects on my channel are expensive and time-consuming, so unfortunately, I can only put out a few videos a year. Liking, subbing, and bell notifications do help, but to be honest, one of my favorite parts of my videos is actually the comment section. The encouragement I've gotten in the comment section has really helped keep me motivated to make more projects and videos. I've read every comment so far, and replied to as many as I can. Reading them all has been extremely time-consuming, but it's worth it to me, and I plan to continue to do so as long as I can. I also post work-in-progress stuff to my Discord server, Twitter, and Instagram if you want to see what projects I'm working on. And I'd also like to give a shout out to my patrons, Nold, Jenny, Noah, Buzzy C, and VidPlay7. You guys rock. Thank you for all the love and support on this channel and my projects so far. See you all next project.